All right, so we're going to start in Mark 5. We're going to start with some familiar stories that most of you probably heard. And we're also going to find out what happened to John the Baptizer. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't read the end of John the Baptizer's story, you will figure out what happens to him today.
Spoiler alert.
Some people haven't read the end of the book yet, so, spoiler alert. But last week we learned about the 10 parables that Jesus taught and saw him rebuke the storm and the demon-possessed men. And so we're going to look at some more healings today, and we're going to upset a king, unfortunately. Okay? So let's start in Mark 5, and we're going to be on verse 21. It says, "And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came out one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, 'My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be well and live.'" Okay? So this is after Jesus has healed the demon-possessed men. Okay, remember, he didn't even get into the city. He was on the shore and met the guys, healed them, and then was told to get back in his boat. So he's now gone back to the other side of the sea. And when he gets to the town, the ruler of the synagogue comes out, and he tells him that his little daughter is sick, and she's at the point of death, and that he needs to come and lay his hands on her. Okay? So this is obviously by faith, that Jairus is coming out to him, because as the ruler of the synagogue, he's a pretty important guy in this city. He would have been very well known, usually pretty wealthy, and would have been very famous in the town. And now he's coming to this unofficial rabbi. Remember, Jesus is not an official rabbi, but this unofficial rabbi asks for healing. Okay? Well, as they are heading towards Jairus' house, because Jesus says, "Yes, I will come," as they're heading that direction, a crowd starts gathering around Jesus, because now Jesus is back, right? More people want healing, more people want teaching, so they're crowding in around him. Okay? And this woman in the crowd, who has been bleeding for 12 years, she decides that it's time for her healing. Okay, so by faith, probably in a superstitious way, she just says, "If I can touch the tassels on his garment." So the Jews, they would have these little white and blue tassels that they would tie to the end of their garment. It would kind of look like frays at the end of their garments. And she believed if she could just reach out and touch it, that she would be healed. And that was all that she would need. Okay, so faith, but possibly some superstitious faith there. Okay. But she did come to him in faith. Now remember, she's not supposed to be in the crowd. She is unclean. She is not supposed to be there, much less be touching people. Okay, then everything that she touched would then become unclean. People, objects, anything she came in contact with would be unclean. Okay? So, when she touches it, she is then made clean. So the reverse happens. Right? In their culture, if you are unclean and you touch something clean, that clean thing became unclean. When she touches Jesus, the reverse happens. Jesus' cleanness is transferred to her, and she moves from unclean to clean. Okay? So she's been battling this for 12 long years, and she realizes it's happened. I have my healing. And Jesus realizes some power has gone out of me. Somebody has been healed by the crowd. Okay? And he calls her forward. Well, she probably didn't go publicly to him, because it's kind of an embarrassing situation. She didn't want to embarrass him. She didn't want to be embarrassed in this huge crowd that she's not supposed to be there, because they probably would have sent her away and "You're not even supposed to be here. You can't be here with us." But Jesus calls her forward because he wants to address her faith. And she had enough faith to come to him, and he wants to address it. And he calls her daughter. The only time he's ever recorded is using this word, and it is the same word that Jairus used for his daughter when he came to Jesus and said, "My daughter is laying ill." It's the same word. And I wonder, Jesus, knowing that Jairus called his daughter this word, that he was trying to show that this woman was just as important as Jairus' daughter. Okay? He was trying to show that they are equally important. This little girl who is completely innocent and is dying, and this woman who has been suffering for 12 years are the same. They're worth the same to him. Okay? Well, poor Jairus, because as everyone is standing there and Jesus is talking with this woman and wasting time, someone someone comes from his house and tells him that his daughter has taken her last breath, and he was not there to be with her during her last breath. And that she is now gone. So don't bother the master anymore. She's gone. Okay? It probably struck Jairus right to the heart, swollen stomach, because that's his life. His daughter is now dead. And it was because of this unclean woman that Jesus didn't make it there in time. So it probably cut him deep. And we know this because Jesus tells him, stop being afraid. So without Jairus saying anything, he is able to look into Jairus' soul and heart and go, listen, man, it's going to be all right. Stop being afraid. And then he tells him one other thing. He says, only believe. That's it. Stop being afraid and just believe. Now that's a pretty tall order for a man who just lost his daughter. And it sounds so harsh. It sounds almost cruel to just say, don't be afraid, just believe. Okay? It's a simple request, but not easily lived out in reality. Okay? Well, for an unknown reason to us, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John only with him to Jairus' house. And when they get there, there's this great commotion going on. Now, this would have been very expected in their culture. When somebody passes away, you would actually hire mourners to come cry, because the louder you could make the sounds, the more worthy that person's life was. So somebody has hired these people to come cry out and cry and just be there. Probably would have been, really beneficial for women to have that job, because, we can pretty much just cry on command, right? Especially if you're getting paid on the side there. But there's this huge cry that's coming out until Jesus shows up and he says, she's not dead, she's just sleeping. And they go from crying out in mourning to, who's this guy? And they start ridiculing him. And the word means continually ridiculing him. So they're following him. What are you talking about? She's just asleep. Are you nuts? What kind of man are you? Are you kidding me? Remember? They've switched like that. Okay? Alright, so Jesus drives them all out of there. He says, listen, get out of here. I don't have anything to do with all of you. And he takes his 3 followers and Jairus and his wife, and they go inside to the little girl. Now, she is dead. Okay? Sleeping is a euphemism for dead. They didn't like to say the word dead. She's dead, okay? And Jesus walks in and just tells her, get up. And she does. And that's it. It's time to wake up. Let's go. It's time to get up. And she does. And the account tells us that she is 12 years old.
Oh, wow.
So we see many parallels here. Jairus' daughter enjoyed a free, carefree last 12 years. She was a child. She was just on the verge of womanhood, probably has not bled yet, but heading in that direction right before she dies. Now this woman has spent 12 years bleeding, growing worse, growing poorer, growing more desperate, to where she just grabs onto some tassels is going to be her last hope. She's been removed from her community. Now Jairus was an important, wealthy man, but this woman is so poor, we don't even know her name. We have Jairus' name recorded. We don't even know this woman's name. And Jairus came to Jesus publicly. And this woman is crawling down on the ground and trying to hide him in the crowd. But both were called daughter, and both were healed by faith. Both were worthy in Jesus' eyes. Okay? Alright, so right after this, we're going to jump to Matthew 9, and we're going to see what happens as Jesus finally makes it to his house. Okay? So Matthew 9 and verse 27 and 28. So, and as Jesus was passing on from there, so he's left Jairus' house and he's heading back to his house. As Jesus passed on from there, 2 blind men followed him, crying out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." And when he entered the house, the blind men came and followed him inside. And Jesus said to them, "Do you believe that I'm able to do this?" And they said to him, "Yes, Lord." Right? That is the only acceptable answer when God asks you a question. Yes, Lord. Okay? But they are crying out for mercy from the Son of David. That's a messianic term there. They are referring to him as Messiah. Okay? So, Jesus has healed the woman. He has raised Jairus' daughter, and he's trying to head back home. Okay, he's probably tired. He's trying to head back home. And these two blind men come looking for Jesus. Can you find the irony in that statement? There are two blind guys who are looking for Jesus. Okay? They find him miraculously. We don't know how. It probably wasn't a very easy task, right? But they locate him. They can't see him, but they know him. They know his voice. They know where he's at. They can follow the crowd. They come looking for him. Okay? And they find him, and they follow him inside of his house. And Jesus asks one question. Do you believe? And they say, yes, Lord. And he says, okay, based on your faith, then you're healed. Okay? So these two guys, blind guys, walk into Jesus' house blind, and they walk out healed. Okay? And as they're walking out the door, someone else is walking in. Matthew 32, verse 32. And as they were going away, behold, a demon-oppressed man who was mute was brought to him. And when the demon had been cast out, the mute man spoke, and the crowds marveled, saying, never was anything like this seen in Israel. Okay? So the blind guys leave, and they pass a guy coming in who's being brought into Jesus. And he is demon-possessed. Okay? Now this was a pretty clever demon. Because what have we talked about last week with the two demon-possessed men? The rabbis believed that you had to trick a demon into telling you its name before it could be cast out. So this demon, probably being very clever, just said, well, if he can't talk, he can't reveal my name. Therefore, it can't be cast out. Well, Jesus doesn't need that. He doesn't need that superstition, right? He just tells him, come out. And he does. He doesn't need to know the demon's name, okay? He just casts him out, and now the man can speak freely again. And this makes the crowds marvel even more, because remember, they don't believe that kind of power existed. Their rabbis had to trick a demon, had to spend a lot of time with this person and trick the demon into revealing his name and then go through this elaborate ceremony to cast it out. Jesus doesn't need all that. He says, listen, fellas, dinner's on the table. Can we just hurry this along? All right, come out. There you go. Have a nice day. Okay? That's all he needs. That's all he needs. He doesn't need an elaborate charade. He doesn't need to trick a demon. He just says, come out. You're done. You're done. Okay? And the Pharisees still think his authority comes from the demons he's been casting out, unfortunately for the Pharisees. All right, so after this event, Jesus decides to continue on his teaching, and he goes back to Nazareth, unfortunately for the last time. Matthew 13, verse 53. And when Jesus had finished these parables, he went away from there, and coming to his hometown, he taught them in their synagogue, so that they were astonished and said, where did this man get this wisdom and these mighty works? Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary? And are not his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And are not all of his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all of these things? And they took offense at him. But Jesus said, a prophet is not without honor except in his hometown and in his own household. And he did not do mighty works there because of their unbelief. Probably one of the saddest pieces of scripture. So Jesus decides to go back home, travel back to Nazareth, and on a Sabbath he goes to the synagogue like he's usually doing, and he teaches. But the people there are not very happy with him. And they start to question his authority. What is this guy doing? He left here a carpenter, a poor carpenter at that. And now he's come back as a rabbi thinking he's got authority to talk to us? Who is this guy? We know who this guy is. They give the names of all of his brothers. They give the name of his mother. This is probably a derogatory jab at Mary because she claimed to be virgin, right? Usually you refer to a guy by his father. This is Joseph's son. No, this is Mary's son. He's not Joseph's son, remember? So it's probably a dig at Mary. And they say the fact that all of his sisters are here living with them. They probably married and stayed there in Nazareth. That was usually what was expected. Okay? And Jesus explains the hard fact that a prophet is often most rejected by the people closest to him. Okay? Matthew and Mark tell us that Jesus was limited in his ability to heal in Nazareth. Okay? He could not do the mighty works he had planned for those people because of their unbelief. Though Mark tells us he was able to heal a couple of people, just a handful of people in this town he was able to heal. It is a difficult thing to realize that our unbelief is what stops God. Jesus had these big plans for Nazareth. These were the people that knew him. He had grown up there for 30 years and knew these people. Remember, Nazareth's a small town. We're talking less than 300 people. There's more people in this church than there was in Nazareth. So he knew these people, and he could not heal them, could not teach them because of their unbelief in who he was. Okay? But Jesus doesn't let their rejection of him hinder his ministry. He just simply moves on and continues on teaching. Okay? So now, go back to Matthew 9.
Jenifer, can I ask a quick question? In what we were reading earlier, he tells them not to go and tell. Is his intent still to not cause a scene?
Yes. So the issue is timing. Okay? So one of the things is we're getting to a point about this end of his 2 years of his ministry. So he still has probably another year of ministry. And so he's trying to keep down the political rivalry and stuff that's going on right now. So he's telling them, listen, it's not time yet. Because if he just said go and do, they would have massed an army. Okay? They would have had people, they would have had weapons, they would have had money. They're like, come on, let's go. We want a military leader. And he's trying to tell them that's not what this is about. Okay? And he keeps sending them out, sending them out, sending them away, sending them out. Because he knows if he stirs it up too soon, the timing's going to be off. We talked about the Jubilee year. We talked about certain other things that have to happen in the prophecy. So yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it seems kind of odd that he tells the people that he's healed not to speak, but we're getting ready to see what he's going to do with his 12. Okay, so Matthew 9, verse 35. And Jesus went throughout all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. So we talked about that word compassion before. That's not just feeling sorry for someone. That is feeling sorry for someone so deep in your soul that it has to come out in action. Okay, that's what the word compassion means. So he encountered the depths of human need so much that he saw them like sheep without a shepherd. Well, the fact was that they had shepherds. They had priests, and they had Levites, and they had scribes, and they had the Pharisees, and they had the Sadducees. They had a bunch of shepherds, but those shepherds weren't faithful shepherds. They weren't shepherds who were caring properly for their sheep. Okay? So Jesus tells his disciples, pray for good laborers. Pray for laborers who will not let the harvest go to waste. Okay? And the Greek word picture there is pray that God would cast out with force more laborers. It's the same word he used when he cast out demons. Okay? It is sad to realize that most of us need that kind of push from the Lord to do what we're supposed to be doing. Right? Not just go, yes sir. It's pick you up by your collar and fling you out. Most of us need that. Okay? Alright, so then he sends out his 12 in Luke 9, 1-2. And he called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and heal. Okay? So, in his depths of compassion, he prepares an assignment for his 12. Okay? So he calls the 12 guys together in a holy huddle, right? All right, guys, time to go. This is going to be your homework assignment. Okay? I'm giving you power and authority over demons and diseases. So he separates out the two and a culture that tied them together. They believed that if you were sick and diseased, that you had a demon, or God was wrathful on you. And he splits the two. Two different authorities here. Okay? And he goes, okay, guys, we're going to send you out. You're going to do what I've been doing. You're going to be like me. Okay? Now, the disciples didn't have their own authority. Remember, they're a bunch of fishermen and just, guys. Jesus gives them this authority. And he taught them and had prepared them, and that was their turn to go out. Okay? So, he sends them to preach and to heal. And he tells them to go into the region of Galilee, but not to the Gentiles. He wants them to go to the lost sheep. Okay? So he had told them, I see my people as lost sheep. I'm sending you to the lost sheep first. That's the first priority and then it would spread to the Gentiles, just like he had done. Where did he go first? He went into the synagogue. That's where the Hebrews were. And then he went out to beside the sea and out further teaching, okay? So it started there, but that's not where it stopped. It was not only for them. That was just the starting point. This is a tie back to the Old Testament because the Hebrew people were supposed to be the light to the world. It was their job, handed to them, to bring the nations to God. That was their responsibility, and they dropped the ball. They didn't do it. So this is another chance, a rebirth of that promise of we're going to go to Israel. We're going to teach these people because they're going to then be responsible to go out. Okay, so that was the mission there. All right, and he teaches them something that to us makes zero sense. Two things that just make zero sense to us, but would have been completely in context there. So the Jewish teaching at the time is no one is to go into the Temple Mount with staff, shoes, girdle of money, or dusty feet. So that was the expectation that when you came to the temple, you did not have those things as a teacher. Because the idea was you were not coming in to manipulate people. Okay, you were not coming in there as a showman, right? You're not passing a hat around, getting money, and taking advantage of the people. So you couldn't enter the temple or a synagogue like that if you were a teacher. They needed to make it abundantly clear we are here to teach, to give, not to receive and take. Okay? We're not focused on worldly affairs or trade or things like that. We're here to teach. So Jesus wanted his followers to mirror that expectation. Because if the Jews would see that, they would understand. These people are for real. They're not here to manipulate us. Okay? So he tells them this is what you're supposed to be doing. And by not carrying those things as they went out, they would have to depend on God, right? They would have to depend on God for every step of the way, okay? So they had no extra motives, and it was a dependency lesson for them, okay? Now Jesus warns them that they're not going to be accepted everywhere, unfortunately, okay? And he speaks of a common practice that the Jews would do. If they had to go into a Gentile city, and they left, they would sit down by the side of the road and they would take their sandals off and they would dust out their sandals and wipe off their feet as a sign to the Gentile city of, I'm not even taking your dirt with me. I'm not even taking Gentile unclean dirt with me. Okay, I'm going to leave it here for y'all. Okay, so that was a sign of judgment. You are Gentiles and I'm reminding you that you're Gentiles and that you're not Israel. So he's doing something very similar here. Any city that rejects you, reject them. Go outside, dust off your feet, dust off your sandals as a sign of rejection, which they would have clearly understood. Okay? So that's why he tells them to do that. Matthew tells us that he tells them not to go to the Gentiles, go to the lost sheep. That's where his ministry would start. Now, there's an interesting debate for little history buffs here and people who like apologetics. There's a debate about the staff. A walking stick, okay? Matthew 6:8 specifically allows them to carry one staff, but Matthew 10:12 seems to forbid the carrying of a staff. So it sounds like a contradiction there, right?
And then in Luke it says no staff.
Yeah, okay. But we have to look at the verbs. Mark tells us that Jesus said they could take a staff if they possessed one. So if there was already one in their possession, they could take it with them, okay? In Matthew's account, it lists several things that they were not allowed to purchase. Okay, so they could not purchase a staff among other things, an extra tunic and other things. So if when you walked out, you had a staff that was yours, you could take it with you, but you could not buy one. Okay, so no contradiction there. It's just clearly showing that he was like, I don't want you to buy extra things. I want you to depend on God. Okay, you can take what you have, but depend on God while you're out there. Okay? So you could bring one, but you couldn't buy one. No contradiction there. Okay, so he's going to prepare the 12 more in Matthew 10. Okay, verse 16. Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So he's staying on this shepherd picture here. So be wise as serpent and innocent as doves. Beware of men, for they will deliver you over to courts and flog you in their synagogues. So he honestly warns them what may happen to them. but he's also prophesying about what is going to happen to them later. Because they don't face that much rejection in this little test. They come back pretty unscathed. Some disappointments, no floggings, no jail time, but they will face that, and they can recall back to what happens here, okay? That their persecution would also be very public. They would stand before kings and give a chance to speak. And he says, when you're given that chance, don't fight for your innocence. Give them my message. Because you're going to stand before Gentiles, before kings, before entire courts, and they're going to hear your words. And he said, my Holy Spirit is going to be able to speak for you. Don't speak for yourself. So don't plead your innocence. I didn't do anything wrong. He says, speak. Tell them about me. Yeah, that's going to be your opportunity to speak. Okay? And then he perfectly predicts that his message would divide families and even result in the death of some people who accepted his message. Time and eternity will reveal all hidden things. Okay? Nothing is hidden from God. And he tells them at least 3 times, do not be afraid. They were going to have some stuff that they were going to be afraid of. They were going to face some really hard things, and it was going to be terrifying. And he says, remember my words. Don't be afraid. Okay? That they needed to cling to their faith, and he was going to be with them. Okay? So, we now see one of the prophets who did not find honor in this world. Matthew 14. Matthew 14:1 says, at that time Herod the Tetrarch heard about the fame of Jesus and said to his servants, this is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead, so this is why these miraculous powers are at work in him. Okay? So, Herod, this is Herod Antipas. Okay? He hears about Jesus. You know, gossip comes to the throne, and he's convinced that Jesus is John the Baptizer, raised from the dead. Whoa, what happened to John the Baptizer? We weren't told that he's dead. So it seems like Matthew and Mark kind of time hop here, and then they go back to explain. Okay, so that's why some of it's not chronology that we're talking about. They say something and they're, oh wait, I didn't tell you that John the Baptizer was dead. Let me tell you what happened to John the Baptizer. Okay? So, John the Baptizer was sitting in jail because of Herod's current marriage, remember? Herod had illegally divorced his first wife and is now married to his sister-in-law and niece and now wife. Okay? We talked about that. John was very vocal about this event, and Herod had him arrested but not killed because he was terrified of John's followers. That John's followers would rise up and revolt. So he didn't kill him, but he put him in jail. Okay? Now at some point, Herod's birthday comes along, and we're not told exactly how long John sits in jail. Weeks, months, days, we don't know. A year, we don't know how long he's in jail. But Herod's birthday comes up, and he decides to throw a huge party and feast. Okay? The wine is flowing, everybody's eating, there's dancers, and he brings a young girl forward to dance. This is Salome, and she dances before Herod and his guests. She's the daughter of his current wife, from her first marriage to her uncle. I'm going to show you that Herod's family is basically a wreath in just a second. Okay? Not even joking. All right.
Not a tree, but a wreath.
It's a wreath. I'll show you in just a minute.
Hilarious.
All right. So she had left her uncle husband to live with her Herod Antipas before they were married, and then they got married. She took her daughter with her. Okay. So this daughter is a princess, and she's dancing. That's a big no-no. That would have been a huge no-no, a huge scandal to have the princess dancing. And can I tell you that these dances were not what we would think of when we see dances. They were very suggestive, very on purposely to arouse the crowd. Okay, and she's dancing this. Well, Herod is very pleased with her dancing and her performance and promises to give her anything she asks for, up to half of his kingdom. I'll give you anything you ask for. And she goes, gee, I don't know what to ask for. She's actually just a teenager. She's like, I don't know what to ask for. I'll go ask my mom. My mom's great. She's so wise. I'll ask her what to get. We find out that mom has been planning and scheming. She knows her husband, current husband, Okay? She knows this family pretty well. She demands the head of John the Baptizer because this is the man that has publicly humiliated her, unashamedly humiliated her, and she wants his head. Okay? So that's what she asked her daughter to ask her husband for. Bring me John the Baptizer's head. Well, Herod's afraid to actually do this. The word there is terrified. He's more terrified of his wife than his guests, so he agrees. And he has John the Baptizer beheaded and his head put on a platter and presented in the middle of his birthday feast. And he gives it to Salome, who then gives it to her mother. And she brings it home as a trophy. And John's followers go and retrieve the rest of his body and bury the rest of his body, the only honor they could bestow upon him. And his head sits in Herodias' room as a trophy. Don't worry, that's not the end of the story.
I thought my family was messed up.
All right. Luke 9, verse 9 says, Herod said, John I beheaded, but who is this about whom I hear so many things? And he sought to seek him. So he wanted to see Jesus. This was not for a spiritual enlightenment conversation. He wanted to see magic tricks. He wanted to be entertained. Now, we will see that Herod eventually gets his wish. On the morning of Jesus' crucifixion, which we will get there, Herod is in Jerusalem, and Pilate sends Jesus to Herod. But we'll see that Jesus doesn't live up to the king's expectations, and he refuses to perform magic tricks before him. He keeps completely silent before Herod. Okay? And in fact, Herod is not a king. Well, not officially. He has been denied the title of king by Emperor Augustus when Emperor Augustus put him in the position he is currently in. Now, history tells us his second wife, Herodias, the one who asked for John the Baptizer's head, nags Herod constantly to get the title of king. You deserve it. You have the right to it. You need to get it. Okay? Presses him constantly for this title, and he does repeatedly, and he's repeatedly denied before every emperor that holds the throne. Meanwhile, trouble's brewing for Herod, and they don't get their happy ending. Herod's first wife is the daughter of a king of a neighboring country, and he is completely offended by the divorce and the disgrace of his daughter. And he gathers an army, and he goes to war with Herod Antipas, and he wins. Okay? Meanwhile, we get a change of emperor. Emperor Caligula comes to power. John harasses the mess out of him. I want the title of king. I deserve it. Well, Herod's brother Agrippa accuses Herod of being a traitor against Rome. And Caligula's like, you know what? I agree. This guy has did nothing but harassing me. I agree. He's a traitor to Rome's throne. And he dismisses him and banishes him to the province of Gaul. Well, his current wife has the choice. She could stay where she is, or she could follow him into exile. She probably chose wrong. She follows him into exile. So banished, disgraced, and defeated, both Herod Antipas and Herodias commit suicide. They didn't get their happy ending after all. And so ends the first 2 years of Jesus' ministry. So let me show you Herod's wreath. Okay? See if you can follow along with this. It's very difficult. Alright, so we have to start off with Herod, our not so great. So Herod the Great. He's the one that starts this whole thing off. Okay? He's actually married 10 times. Okay? Sometimes to more than one woman at a time, sometimes divorced and is remarried, but he's got at least 10 wives. I'm going to talk to you about 4 of them. So one of his wives is Marimene the First. Okay? And she has, I'm going to butcher these names, so, I'm not a professional on names. She has a son, And he gets married to his cousin, Bernice. Okay? They're cousins. And they have Herodias. Okay? With me so far? Okay, so that's one wife of Herod the Great. She has a son. The son marries his cousin, and that produces Herodias.
Hold on. She has a son with him?
With him.
Okay.
Yes.
He's
So
the first
this
son?
is-
Got it.
Yeah, this is marriage, and then this is birth. Okay?
Okay.
So they're married, they have a son, the son marries his cousin and produces their daughter Herodias.
Son marries the cousin.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. Divorces her, marries another time. This is like his 5th or 6th wife, so he's been married a couple of times. No relation. Same thing,
Okay.
no relation. But they have a son who is Herod Philip the First. Okay? This is who marries Herodias. Okay? So, husband and wife have a son, Herod Philip. Herod Philip marries Herodias.
And they're related,
They're related.
right?
Yes.
So,
Yep.
They get divorced.
are they?
Yeah, follow the tree.
Finally.
Does that
Okay.
make them?
It's a niece.
It's
Is that
a
Denise?
step something, right?
Right.
It'd be a half
So-
brother or half sister.
With
The
They're
child-
same daddy.
the
They all got
child
the same- they all got the
of the
same
the
daddy.
two
Yeah.
sons with two
So that's her
Your
uncle.
half brother's daughter.
Yeah, half brother's daughter.
It'd be half.
Uncle
Yeah.
Herod the Philip is her husband. Okay? That's her first
I'm
husband.
already lost.
Right?
Her first husband.
And they have Salome. Okay? So this is the first marriage. That's her uncle. Okay?
And she's the dancer?
This is the
Salome.
one who dances.
Okay.
And which is the one that we've been talking about?
Herodias.
No, which Herod?
We're gonna get to her. Divorces her. Another marriage. Okay? Malthus. So they have Herod Antipas. Our Herod for right now. Okay? And he was first married to the princess. Okay? This is her name if you're interested in her name. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. He's married to the princess first and divorces her and goes and marries Herodias.
Boy.
Okay? And then he's divorced from her. These are just 4 of his marriages, y'all. He has Cleopatra, not that Cleopatra, the one we talked about that's 100 years before Cleopatra. This is her. And they have Philip II. Okay? He's who's known in Acts as the Philip the Tetrarch. Tetrarch. That's him. He marries Salome. I told you it's a read.
It's a bush.
And this is just 4 of his wives, okay? This is just 4 of his
crazy.
10 wives.
Nothing like keeping it in the family.
Yeah, this is crazy.
For real.
Okay, so 4 wives, and we have 4 sons here. Marry a cousin, produce Herodias. We have another son who marries her, gets divorced, marries this one. This one is the one who dances before them and asks for John the Baptizer's head, and then she goes and she marries her uncle. Okay,
So which mom?
Who's the mom of Solomon?
Yeah.
Herodias.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, these 2 have Herodias. Have Salome. Okay. So Herod the Great's family tree is a wreath. Okay. This is
Yes.
part of the family tree. He is married 10 times, and they all do this. They all just marry each other to keep it in the family. Okay? This is what John the Baptizer looked upon and said, no, this is disgraceful, y'all. Y'all need to stop doing this.
Yet it continued throughout history. I mean, most of our kings,
Mm-hmm.
not our kings, but most of the kings and queens that we have learned about throughout time.
Herod made him famous. Yeah. Most of them were, at least try to distance a little bit, or married and brought in more, not them. They're just like, oh, okay, we got a cousin now, we got a half sister, you got a niece, a stepdaughter, like, we'll just marry them all around. Yeah.
Talk about some major genetic.
Uh-huh. So you understand why John the Baptizer was upset. This is what he's dealing with. These are the people who are ruling him. This is what the people were looking up to. And he's going, no, this is wrong. This is wrong. You shouldn't be doing this. And he gets his head cut off for it. And he is a prophet without honor in Jerusalem. Okay. Yeah, that took me a while to clear up.
How could you make a craft out of that for Christmas?
Haired family reunion.
I mean, you couldn't even like put the cousins together and the brothers together
Just
because
an
there
honor, John the Baptizer.
would have to be in all the circles. You know what I mean?
They would have to be like little pieces.
Right.
Like Velcro.
Or like multiple of them.
Yeah.
Like, so you could just put them in everywhere.
You would need like pictures of all their faces.
Imagine a family reunion. This is my sister, cousin, wife, brother.
Speak of family reunion, that's where this came out of. They went to go visit Herod's family for the weekend, and that's when Herod Antipas met Herodias and said, she's my wife now. And she went to go live with him. She divorced her husband and went to go live with him, and then they got
Talk
married.
about coveting.
Right.
And Herod, poor Herod Philip, he's like, I just wanted to get together for the weekend. Y'all, I just want to barbecue. And my half brother steals my wife. Y'all think Middleburg's bad?
What about a Jerry Springer show?
Yeah.
Dallas. Yeah, that's what happened. That's why he meets Herodias and says, that's my wife now. And she goes, cool. I'll just divorce him and I'll come live with you. That's what happened. Yeah, that's what history tells us.
So in their time frame, was divorce considered okay?
No.
Okay.
Very illegal. They could marry multiple, which sometimes Herod did have multiple wives at some times, but then a divorce was a no-no
And that was across all cultures at that time.
at the time.
And
Yeah.
especially for her to leave.
Him. Mm-hmm.
Now, do we know just history-wise, was that a little bit more acceptable in other cultures for white? Did women in other cultures have any more?
No.
Okay.
Most were unable to. She could only do it because we're talking about Roman law here. And so she manipulated the system. It's still illegal. She shouldn't have been able to do it.